Have you ever heard a more powerful manifesto issued for the purpose of government? And yet, when you and I pointed out and protest against it, we are attacked as fringe radicals, nutcases. Well, here is the exact course that brought Agenda 21 to America and into your local community. At the top of the infrastructure, pushing sustainable development is the United Nations Environmental Program, the UNEP. But the UNEP doesn't operate on its own. Influencing it are thousands of non-governmental organizations, NGOs. These are private groups which seek to implement a special political agenda. Through the UN infrastructure, particularly through the UNEP, they have great power. And I should point out to you that true NGOs are groups officially sanctioned and certified by the UN to participate in these international efforts. Somebody just doesn't suddenly rise up and say, I'm an NGO. They have an application that's about that thick to fill out, and in it they pledge to implement UN policies. Now, prior to the 1992 UN Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, these sanctioned NGO groups spent considerable time writing and creating the document that would be introduced to the world as Agenda 21. At the Earth Summit, nearly every head of state signed agreement to Agenda 21, including President George H.W. Bush. Agenda 21 is not a treaty that has to be ratified by the Senate. Rather, it's what's known as a soft law policy, a guideline that the nation agrees to implement through its own legislative process. And that fact makes it very difficult to track Agenda 21 policy coming from the UN down to your local city council because of that. President Bush, in signing the document, committed the U.S. to implement the policies of Agenda 21. Agenda 21 then gained huge momentum when in 1993, President Bill Clinton issued an executive order to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development and made it official U.S. policy. Take a look at who served on that council, and you will see many of the same NGOs which helped write Agenda 21 for the United Nations. They include Jonathan Latch of the World Resources Institute, one of the three most powerful organizations influencing the UNEP. Also on the President's Council were John Sawhill of the Nature Conservancy, and Jay Hare of the National Wildlife Federation, and Michelle Perrault, International Vice President of the Sierra Club. All players in the creation of Agenda 21, now openly serving on the President's Council with a specific mission of implementing Agenda 21 into American policy. And there is an even more direct connection between Agenda 21 and our federal government. Included at the UNEP table to develop the policy, along with all of those NGO groups who helped write it in the first place, are these players in the federal government. They include the Department of State, the Department of Interior, the Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. These agencies send representatives to all UNEP meetings. Why do they do that? If Agenda 21 is just a myth that has no effect on our government. You might remember a great deal of discussion during the Clinton administration about the idea of reinvention of government. Vice President Al Gore was put in charge of that reinvention, and well, that should have been a first clue. The reinvention, of course, was sustainable development. The purpose of the President's Council was to translate the guidelines of Agenda 21 into public policy to be administered by the federal government. And that step-by-step process translated into the ruling authority through which a UN plan, Agenda 21, has become unquestioned U.S. policy throughout the nation. It was invented by NGOs through the UN. It was brought to the U.S. through the President's Council and through federal and state legislation. It is being implemented on the local level through the involvement of the same NGOs who helped write it in the first place. Sustainable development is not a local idea or a local